If you're new in town or just new to this whole podcast thing, you're tuning in to Law by Night, the podcast that discusses all things vampiric with no fear of breaching the Masquerade. In this episode, we continue to unravel the mysteries behind the origins, motives, and cultures of the 16 ghostly guilds in the world of darkness. This episode will focus on the Haunters Guild and their Pandemonium Arcanos. Don't mind the mess, Explorer. We are still recovering from last night's splunkling in the New Forest. There have always been rumours of hauntings and all manners of things spooky in that beautiful sight, but we got a tip from a certain source that there was something particularly unpleasant there, and, well, as you can see, it has left most of the explorers most befuddled. We are just experienced as we are inexperienced with regards to the rest of this dead dear explorer, especially with the most powerful and potent of haunts. What we suspect is that we were ambushed by a circle of haunters, one of the criminal guilds in Stygian society. It is a conclusion that I have only just made. Even I, Dr. Frederick Phoenix, co-founder of the Phoenix Institute, can get just a little frightened. Only a little, mind you. Oh, come now. I have a reputation to uphold, you know. Anyway, enough about me, for I am not the only one that is all that interesting. As you were unavailable over the weekend, I suppose I should fill you in with the Haunters and their strange powers of Pandemonium, which is actually the name of their unique Arcanos. Let's start with that then, shall we? What is Pandemonium? Well, in a literary sense, to cause pandemonium is to cause a wild and noisy disorder of confusion, uproar. It has older origins, in the ancient Greek meaning little spirit, and the Christians afterwards would interpret as a word for demon. Both of these things make sense when we remember that the wraiths of the Middle Ages would terrorize, or as they put it, tease the mortals, assuming the forms of demons via their Arcanos manipulation. Regarding the former description, the confusion and chaos from before, the most infamous ways wraiths can achieve this within the Skinlands is through the Arcanos of the same name. Pandemonium, though, it does have the interesting nickname of wielding or wilding, which we will get into shortly. Unlike most of the Arcanos we have covered so far, Pandemonium affects the Skinlands exclusively, so its use is obviously prohibited by Stygian law. Haunters, be it name or guild association, develop of negative reputation because of it, with some turning a little mad in the process. Obviously, the Haunters of the Haunters Guild have a significantly different outlook. As the Haunters understand it, Pandemonium originates from the Covenant, the earliest haunters formed with the wild or the wield. Every user of Pandemonium has a spark of wielding within them, but a true haunter will embrace the changes in the world around them. The more powerful the wilding, the more versatile and less normal the haunter. If those things don't make much sense to you, fear not, because we will go over this together. The Pandemonium Arcanos allows one to tap into chaos itself, releasing strange energies into our world. The source is disputed, but we do know that Pandemonium is obscured by the Shroud as the fog, the strange permutations that protect most mortals from comprehending the existence of wraiths and their activities, meaning that these effects do not last very long. Whether a small object is moved, a room begins to reek of death, or time itself begins to speed up or slow down, mortals don't remember exactly what happened. Naturally, when things go wrong, they tend to affect objects and surroundings not intended by the haunter. We have found cases of Pandemonium affecting the Shadowlands vicinity around the haunter, as well as stealing corpus and pathos of the haunter with nothing caused to the Skinlands. And before you try and remind remind me about video and audio recordings. Those can be altered, you know. Not with Pandemonium, but what's to stop you or me to edit something in our favour? Rather easily at that fact too. The only certain way to identify what is going on beyond the use of technology and plenty of witnesses is through the haunter themselves, who can sense if a particular event is being caused by Pandemonium, or if something has been touched by someone's shadow, or whether a mortal has been tampered with by a wraith or a spectre. It's these constant dealings with the Shroud that has left an interesting mark. Not a guild mark in the truest sense, but a mark on their sanity. Many haunters are considered to be quite insane and exhibit many an odd quirk. This is due to their art evoking and witnessing mind and reality-altering effects. This isn't helped much by the fact that some particularly talented wraiths can allow the haunter to use themselves as the manifestation point of their arts. Many within the guild also adopt black robes that billow on command as a sort of badge of honour or theatrical device when they use Pandemonium. They serve a more functional role within the guild. They hide any deformities on their corpus caused by Pandemonium, like rats or insects scurrying from any orifice. The cloaks would soon provide more of a psychological advantage over the guilds and wraiths alike, concealing their build and hide weapons, relics and artifacts with ease. It's obscurity with layers, dear explorer. This is only added when we look at how the guild became to be, specifically their power, because they do go hand in hand with each other. Yes, you could argue this has been the case of all the guilds as we've discussed so far, and the remaining ones, but their power was obtained in a very different way to the other guilds. But let us start at the beginning, when the Shroud was nothing more than a thin suggestion that stretched between our worlds. Rather than being the impenetrable force it is today, it served as an inconvenience to most ancient wraiths. Wraiths were appreciated far more than they are today, as we've discussed before. Oh, how time flies. Anyway, when certain religious bodies came to fruition and decided the motion of rewarding the good and torturing evil after death, things began to change in the afterlife, as not only many were sent there, to put it nicely, but attitudes in the Skinlands changed. Humans unknowingly distanced themselves from the restless dead. Ghost stories aplenty would form, and the Shroud would thicken, and there was little anyone could do about it. The wraiths that would form the Haunters Guild were trying to storm the walls of the Shroud, breaching its defences. Wraiths across the world that shared this motive banded together and found some areas were stronger than others. They set up means of communication and found that it was the mortals that created, or rather reinforced, the strength of the Shroud with their theories, ideas and gossip about stories and their hauntings. They were, and still are, certain humanities the key to their freedom. The founding members of the guild, the Pandora Skia, or Pandora Shadow in English, realised that if they could cement the world as haunted, they would permanently weaken these spots in the Shroud, granting them the access they desired. They haunt to scare us to believe they exist and that there's another realm out there, making them somewhat legends throughout the ages, fighting what they believed was their right to return to the Skinlands. It is here where wraiths would willingly appear as demons, dark deities and so forth. Anything they could do to inspire fear and belief in the quick. It is almost a pity that it was Charon that ruined the guild plans. He warned all of his subjects of the dangers beyond the veil, warning them to band together and follow his beliefs or be branded as renegades. The Haunters Guild would avoid Charon and the Ferryman as they carried on trying to tear down the Shroud, which presented a problem all of its own. It was becoming too strong, for Outrage and Embody could only do so much, and two separate guilds were doing more of those gifts anyway. That, and they affected the living rather than the Shroud itself, which was far too predictable for the Haunters. The spooks who took ownership of Outrage originally came from the Haunters, which will come up and again in a moment, and several Then came the days when Pandemonium was discovered, or rather, bestowed upon the group. The most common story among these within the guild talk of a wraith called Theseus, probably the individual of the same legend. He spent 9 days and nights pursuing Charon in hope to discover the source of his powers, following Charon down the Venice stair and into the labyrinth, with Charon walking freely, undisturbed. Some insist he was answering the callings of the Lady of Fate. Why she was down there, no one knows. Others, mostly those within the Haunters Guild, believe Charon, his ferryman, and Nudri are all spectres. At the Venice stair, Theseus was discovered, giving chase to the Imperator of Stygia, where he got terribly lost in its winding mazes. It was here where he found something known as the Wild, a great dragon imprisoned. When Theseus attempted to free the Wild, it told him it was not ready to escape yet, but it would give Theseus a gift, and all that would learn this gift would become an aspect of the Wild, the aspect of change and possibility. A colleague of mine once described this gift as fragments of the Wild that was destroyed by something called the Worm, forming a connection that would later be called the Covenant. What Theseus was allegedly given was an Eye of the Wild, allowing them and all that learned this gift to draw upon a fragment of the Wild within them to warp reality, thus creating Pandemonium or wielding. My colleague? No idea where they are currently. It has been quite a while since we spoke, so perhaps calling him a colleague was a bit generous. Anywho, the Haunters Guild would take more shape at this point, not out of any desire for any official recognition, but because they sought to pull what they knew and give more focused effectiveness to their goals. Some within the guild say that the creation of the Haunters Guild deviated from their ultimate goals, but that is often speculation of the uneducated. They do know, however, the Proctors attempt at claiming mastery over Pandemonium and Embody, establishing themselves as the only guild to deal with those on the Skinlands, a gesture that would annoy both the Haunters and the Puppeteers, making the Proctors enemies with both of these guilds. That doesn't mean the Haunters like the Puppeteers either. The Haunters want the living to be made aware of ghosts, whilst the Puppeteers want to make the living them. When that attempt of the Proctors failed, it stopped other guilds from attempting similar stunts, and the formation, or summoning I should say, of the first Haunters Conclave in an attempt to present a unified voice. Whilst brought about by the unofficial guild's grandmother, Sweet Sorrow, she did not accept the role of Guildmaster, acting as an advisor to Midian, the Guildmaster. The first conclave was not all constructive though, as those that would form the Spooks Guild did not think their interests were taken into account. This was partly true, as many Haunters thought that outrage was a dead art, as I explained earlier, so the Spooks left, taking their secrets of outrage with them. The Haunters tried making the Spooks feel that they needed them, but gave up when the Artificers declared them a guild proper. Hilariously, the Haunters needed the Spooks more. While some show some animosity still, the Haunters and Spooks are bosom buddies once more. There is more to this little separation and coming back together, but that is a conversation for another time. Which leads me on to the War of the Guilds once more. The Haunters would have been totally oblivious to it had they were not warned about the Artificers' goals from the Spooks. The Haunters were not too happy with the arrogance of the guild either, and a second conclave assembled to discuss what to do. No one could agree on the best course of action, so various groups did their own thing. Lacking allies, the Artificers claimed the position they originally coveted. The one positive thing this brought was bringing the guilds together and becoming more aware of their neighbours, so to speak. A third conclave was called during the Revolt of the Guilds, where it was discussed how to handle the situation. Yes, they did not want the hierarchy to exist, but neither did they want the Artificers to assume leadership. Whilst there was some more arguing and debating, it was decided that they would support the Artificers with help from the Spooks and Fishers, worshippers of a form of Christianity, and destroy the Soul Forgers. This did cause friction, as not only were the Fishers unpopular in Stygian society, society, but many within the guild did not like the political message they sent out. In fact, many didn't like being involved with the politics at all. It did not matter, as we know the revolt was a spectacular flop, much to the relief of the guild. While some haunters and spooks were destroyed by the hierarchy as punishment, many were left untouched, corrupting the Shroud's influence as they always had done. The haunters would rise and fall in popularity in the Skinlands, for lack of a better phrase, as witch hunters and the Victorians' addiction to the paranormal made things easier and more difficult for them. It has been noted in many a case that, despite thinking lowly of the hierarchy, the guild does take contracts from their legionnaires and anacreons, but from a distance. Some loathe the renegades and some approve of their motives, though the more general war cry of "you should fight cause it's the right thing to do" doesn't resonate much with the guild. Similarly with the heretics. The guild does what the guild wants for the guild and only for the guild. Regarding the guilds not mentioned, our research finds that there is not much animosity with the other guilds, at least not from the perspective of the Haunters Guild. Just don't try to get them to be friendly with the Artificers. It will not happen! Of course, as a reminder, the Haunters and Spooks work together to keep places clean, if you get my meaning, but are the Haunters any more unified? The answer is yes. And no. Whilst there is an unofficial unification of the guild that shares a common ground of ideology, whatever, there are several alliances within the guild that retain their unique ideologies on how to achieve their goal. These are factions called alliances or clubs. They are not rigid, excluding the Mandelbrots and Dantes, and they have free floating memberships. Imagine that! Oh, don't mind me, just going down to the Dwellers this Sunday. Totes cash. Did I say that right? Anywho, there are said to be plentiful of these alliances, but we at the Phoenix Institute know 6 of them. We touched upon one of them earlier tonight, and that was the Pandora Skier, who would rebrand themselves as the HD Dwellers in later years, still standing strong as the guild's leaders, as chosen by Guildmaster Midian. As a reminder, they are the oldest faction in the guild. Technically speaking, every haunter in the guild belongs to this alliance, as all haunters within the guild want to return to a point before the Shroud wasn't as impenetrable as it is now. The HG Dwellers wish to take a step further and learn how to reverse time itself. The Alliance's name is named after such an idea of H.G. Wells' classic The Time Machine, the name becoming a reflection of the changing times. They haunt old places where the effects of pandemonium are expected, finding that the Shroud is weaker in such locales, and the Dwellers' work will often linger. Ruled by the shady and violent Dr. Shudder, the Mandelbrots are the haunters within the guild that believe it was a mistake to ignore the potential of outrage. They combine outrage and pandemonium to manipulate the substance of the Shroud, and as such, retain a close alliance with the Spooks. They are probably some of the more analytical of the haunters, as they, from our research at least, try and find out how to harness the hills in the hope of tearing apart the Shroud. As such, many scientists find themselves at home here, who not only try to use their powers to scare, but to kill too. It is certainly a very strong way of getting folks to acknowledge the existence of ghosts. On a complete contrast, the Caligarians do not care so much for the guild's goals and have even less organization. They use pandemonium as a means of artistic expression, believing that they are no longer limited by physical law. They no longer need any to adhere to its tenets. They target mortal artists who are said to be allied with the maskers pertaining to the renegades. Together, they make freakish art together, molding corpus and environments alike. For a more heretical perspective, the Dantes are a well-structured alliance of Christian heretics under the leadership of Father Foster and his 2 shepherds. The Dantes are under the assumption that this is purgatory, follow the release of Dante's Alighieri's Divine Comedy, that the underworld before them is a test. They use pandemonium to tear away portray the illusions laid out by God themselves as surveyors and explorers of the Shadowlands. They explore quite a bit, becoming rather versed with Argos with strong ties with the Harbingers. The Dantes are said to be excellent tour guides, but only if you have the right oboli and go to church with them, where they will try and convert you. As such, they are a last resort by the guild, as they haunt places that are dripping in sin. Led, or rather spiritually guided by Sweet Mother, the Bedlamers only started to gain decent size during the 17th century, so named after London's Bethlehem Hospital, a filthy asylum for the insane where the public could go purchase tickets to watch the mad perform. The traditions in the Skinland may have lasted some 200 years, but this faction still carries on targeting hospitals, asylums, and prisoners just to cause fear in the criminal and individuals they define as weak-minded. Charon deemed them the most dangerous of the Haunters Guild, having them hunted down, a tradition that carries on to this day. They are the most loathed of the Haunters within the guild too, and are said to be allied with the Laughing Lady of the Penitent Legion in order to spread madness in the Skinlands. It would certainly explain the 2020 so far. Finally, there is the newest alliance, the Order of the Glass Menagerie, who are allied with the Sandmen and, supposedly, the Forbidden Memori. They remember that it's the mortals that reinforce the Shroud with their memories of ghost tales, and so they work to rewrite and remove said thoughts, kindling the memories of a haunting after the fog has taken effect by exercising their arcani. This way, the quick have to confront what they have seen over and over again until the memory sticks. For the Order, haunting is equal opportunity and should be spread across all divisions of society to have the best effect. They are the most practical, patient, careful, and diplomatic of the alliances, though few are interested in the goals of unifying the guild properly. We at the Phoenix Institute have been unable to identify its leaders, as there have been many theories of ideas: Sandman illusions, Lord Ember, spectres, Midian, and Elvis Presley came up more than once, but you can probably see how it may frustrate you, as it does many a new ghost hunter to comprehend the lack of focus at the Haunters Guild. But remember what it is exactly they are known for. Chaos! There is little organization for it. They are chaotic by intention and madness in moderation, and they are quite proud of this. They are not the restless dead, but supernatural beings with a higher, grander goal in the world, to reunite the two worlds as God originally intended. The Haunters continue with their struggle as they master Pandemonium, but given the current state of the world, I do think they're making some progress. To be kept updated, follow the Law by Night VTM Twitter and Instagram pages to find out when we'll upload each episode. You can also find out by subscribing to the YouTube channel and clicking on the little bell, and you'll be immediately notified when the latest episode is live. Until next time, farewell.